Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I'm excited to get today's show started. However, before we do that, I would like to ask our audience for a few favors. Be sure to check out cobrt.com, sign up for our newsletter while you're there. You can find all of our radio shows under the media tab. Click on radio/podcast. And also be sure to sign up for our State of Higher Education Forum. That is our second annual State of Higher Education Forum that will be happening tomorrow morning. So it is the last chance to get that signed up. So I'm happy to introduce today's guests.
Thank you.
Yes, so we have Suzanne Armatas and Scott Freshwater with us.
Hi, thanks, Alex.
Yes, thank you for joining me. And so you guys are here with Armatas Advisory Group.
Correct.
Yes. And your titles are management consultants in organization and workforce development.
Correct. Yes.
Yes. So this is something new for me.
Okay.
That I have not encountered before. So I'm sure that a lot of our audience hasn't encountered it either. So I'm going to ask each of you to explain what your titles are and a little bit more about the Armatas Advisory Group.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll start here with you.
Great. Thank you. Hi, my name's Suzanne Armatas. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks, Alex, for having us. So a little bit about my background. I started in this field of organization development about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, when I was came out of graduate school in University of Minnesota and started in the field of organization development. And essentially what an organization development consultant does is tries to help their clients improve their workforce performance. And there's many different ways you can do that. But our goal as organization development consultants is going in and really trying to understand the problems, helping think through what are the right solutions to align with those problems so the client gets a better return or performance outcomes. So I started about 20 plus years ago as an internal consultant for Honeywell, and one of my first jobs was working in lean manufacturing and process improvement through Six Sigma work. And over the next 10 years or so, I just stayed in the internal roles. And I was working primarily on the West Coast in Los Angeles and San Diego, worked for Honeywell, Qualcomm, Gateway Computers, and a few other companies. And then around 2005, I went out on my own and started my own consulting company. And at the same time, I moved to Colorado. That was about 10 years ago with my family, and went back and finished my PhD in this field called Organizational Performance and Change through CSU, Colorado State University. And so now we work with clients around the space of organization and workforce development, and we'll share a little bit more about what that means as we go on. But that's where I met Scott, and that's how we kind of connected to become partners in this venture.
Awesome. Before we get to, I have one more question.
Sure.
This internal versus external
Yeah.
consulting. How?
That's a great question.
Yes.
Great
How are those
question.
worlds?
Yeah, that's a great question. So an internal consultant typically has a client group, and you have to generally work with very large organizations like Honeywell is a great example. And I worked with Honeywell Aerospace, and my clients were all over the world. So, for example, I worked with Honeywell engines in aerospace, and an internal consulting group has an internal client. And then you're assigned to that client to help them with any kind of organization workforce development needs they may have. So as an example, when I started there, they were implementing lean manufacturing in Singapore. So I went to my client site in Singapore and worked with kind of that audience around how do we best implement lean manufacturing. Now, an external consultant is a little bit different because we're external to the organization. And the idea is we can lend our expertise to a business in many different capacities, right? Because we don't work with one specific company. So, we might be with nonprofits or education or manufacturing or technology. So we kind of gives us opportunity to kind of look broadly across many different industries and size of companies.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you could be a little bit more honest as an external consultant?
Yeah. Well,
I imagine.
and that's a really good question. And I will say, so my PhD is heavily weighted in psychology. So a lot of what you do as an external consultant is, I'll call it hold up the mirror. And so sometimes you need to come into a client and say, okay, here's what I'm seeing, not just organizationally, but from a people standpoint. and give them that kind of honest dialogue back to them. And when you're internal, there's some of the kind of nuances around politics that make it a little bit precarious to do that. Personally, I enjoy this kind of external relationship because it does allow you to kind of build a kind of unique bond with your particular client.
I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Yes. Yeah. Great question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Scott, let's hear about
Thank
you.
Yeah, I think Suzanne said it eloquently what organizational development, workforce development was, and kind of gave how we connected and combined the synergy of knowledge into this organization and moving it forward. So I have a 25-year history in kind of eclectic in a way, but I mean, it mostly was in operations management. But then I moved out of that into business solutions, kind of consulting in the tech sector. Working in Seattle for a company that was based out of there, doing a lot of Microsoft Suite stuff and working with organizations, developing that, mostly on collaboration. But my undergrad degree going way back was in commerce, but I specialized in entrepreneurial management, which at the time was a voodoo term.
Yeah.
It was kind of one of those, we kind of believe in that. But so I spent a lot of time, even on the side, is helping friends start companies and building companies. And then I started building my own, and we built an international consulting firm based in HRD, but that wasn't really what I was doing at the time. I was more in
HRD.
human resource development. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
And human resource components, both from external, helping people work with companies, and then companies working with their talent internally. And then I ended up working for CSU. After I completed my MBA, I met a few people and kind of talked. I was on advisory boards and really helped them change their business model, focusing from intake-driven only students to working with students, developing internal processes to recruit and retain students, and also work with companies basically on challenges that they see in workforce development. How do they train and develop talent? And that's where I kind of spent the last 5 years, and then at that time started my PhD, which I never thought I would do, and like I said, met Suzanne through that. But my PhD as well is similar to hers, is in organizational learning and performance, and I'm focused on white collar workers and automation.
Awesome. Oh, fun. Yeah, automation is one thing that I keep exploring.
Yeah,
Right.
oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's super fun. So you met at CSU. Were you both attending classes at the time when you met, or how did that work? Yeah.
I was a humble student, and she was my lecturer.
I guess I didn't
Okay.
mention that I teach at CSU
Okay.
in the doctorate program
Oh.
and master's program, and I met Scott as one of my students, and I tell this story, and not to just make him feel good, but he was such a sharp, bright person in class. Like, he was adding so much to the class discussion that we just hit it off, because I think we had kind of a meeting of the minds, and so that way we had the opportunity to kind of connect, in other professional senses.
Which is awesome, and it's exciting when you do get a student that can contribute, and
Yes.
it
Yeah.
gets
Oh,
your
so
ball
much.
rolling. As
Exactly.
maybe we can collaborate.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and our mindsets are both on practitioner level outputs as opposed to academic,
Right,
even though she
right.
is. But I think that's where we kind of saw it. And in my cohort, it was mostly an academic focused group, so I kind of had that outlier look to
Yeah.
me. So
Yeah, that's a great point too. Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, let's talk about Armatas Advisory
Okay.
Group.
Perfect.
So this is a group that
Yep.
you work in together.
Yep.
And I know that you focus more on organization and workforce development, or do I have that backwards?
So let me talk a little bit about our engagement model,
Yes.
because and
Yeah.
Scott knows we've talked a lot about this just to make sure we're philosophically aligned. So one of the things that a really good organization consultant will do is make sure they go into a client organization and get really clear on what the context is and what the problem is. Because what you'll have out there, this is a really common problem in my field, is you'll have people that will come in and say, I think you need a disc session. I think you need management training. I think you need team effectiveness training. And they'll come in lead with the solution. So one thing that we really work hard on is getting very clear on what the business problem is of the client, and think about everything we see going on in our business environment today. The needs are so dynamic and so changing. So if you're not really clear on the problem, you're going to apply a wrong solution. So that's why I say I think our our strength collectively is that we have really, really strong diagnostic skills to help clients think through what's going on. And part of the reason why I think we have such strong diagnostic skills is not only our, education, but we have, almost 50 years of business acumen experience in this context. When I started, we didn't even have cell phones. Think about all the transitions and change I've seen, as well as Scott. And so, we work really hard to kind of provide that kind of diagnostic assessment audit up front. And then we'll say, okay, what organization or workforce solution might you need?
And I mean, if I can add a little bit
Sure,
into this,
please.
I think what the wrap on management or business consultants right now is that they're more focused on revenue or things that drive revenue, but not necessarily aligned with the client's needs. And I mean, I think to elaborate a little bit on what Suzanne was saying, it is basically going in and, exploring the problem. You have a presenting problem, that's what they understand, they think they need, and then it's digging deeper. So, a good metaphor would be an onion. It's kind of peeling those layers back to get to the core, because everything has a core problem. They just might not know what that is. So people that are really talented in this area kind of can peel those back and say, but not saying it in a way, you need this, you're failing here. It's just like, yeah, that's good, but let's discover this a little more. So I think it's critical to this role and what we do and our success. So
Absolutely. What percentage of clients do you have come in that are accurate on what's wrong?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So I will say about 90% of clients will come in and say, I need X. And I'll give you an example. So I started, I got a call a number of years ago, about 5 years ago, from Ball Corporation, and they needed someone to come in and help with change management. And really, what they needed at the time was just pure communications help. They were having a big kind of transformational change, and where they were at with the need was just around communications. And so that's example presenting a solution to me. And I said, sure, I can come in and help you with your communications. But as we got in, to use your metaphor, started peeling back, we realized that their change, what they were trying to do, was very large, and that communications was just a piece of it. So then we kind of looked at putting a change strategy in place that kind of augmented what they were trying to do in the business, and it kind of grew from there. So that's an example of like a client coming to you with a solution. I'd say about 90% of them will do that. And sometimes it's okay just starting where they're at and saying, okay, let's try this out and see what kind of business outcome it will get you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so you always recommend having the diagnosis.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, and again, just to add, and she said it so eloquently, it's you have to give them really what they want sometimes, but at the same time, you can say, but I see something that's really the underlying problem. We can do this. It will have a superficial effect, but really you might want to, and it might not be our role, and it might not be something that we can really help them with, but just getting them in that mindset and to have that dialogue with it sometimes is the real help in that. So,
and I would just add that because again, I think having done this for so long, I feel very kind of passionate about this issue. Is I think we have an ethical consideration to tell the client, look, you can pay X to put in this, training program, but please be mindful that this will not impact what you're asking it to impact. And the reason we know that is just from our expertise and experience and education, to say that, a training program probably is not going to get you those business outcomes you're going to want to see. But just be mindful of that. And I think we have an ethical responsibility to tell our clients that, and then they can make an informed decision.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I would imagine you're coming at them from another angle that they didn't even consider.
Right.
How dare you?
Right.
I hired you.
it's a trust platform.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
So,
Absolutely. Well, I want to ask here the differences in businesses. Bigger clients, Fortune 500 companies, for Ball Corporation, for example, versus some smaller clients, maybe a startup or something that's local, doesn't have quite an international or national reach. When you have those discussions, do you get more pushback from the larger companies or smaller companies?
Yeah, I think the trust is a really good example, because so much of what a consultant does, since you're external to the organization, is trying to build trust and relationships with that person.
Yeah.
And we tend to think in terms of like a systems orientation. So, you might say, as a business leader, you might say, we're pivoting off our business strategy because we're introducing, AI or some emergent technology, and it's going to take us to kind of pivot. And because of that, you might be thinking, okay, we need to get everyone trained in this new technology. But what we're thinking is we're thinking about the entire organizational system. What design's going to support you in that effort? How are your leadership teams going to be able to enable the skills set and the change to happen with their workforce? What's the culture that's going to drive these changes? All these elements have to be considered. So I think it's just a matter of scope when you think about it. Big companies have obviously a lot more complexity, maybe more internal resources and stakeholder audience groups. Smaller companies have very similar needs. It may just be different scale.
Right. And I would say to that, the bigger companies are more concerned, or culture is more at the forefront of their decision making, and that they're really protective of that. So
Okay.
more than, and that's generalized, but I mean, and more than the
course.
smaller, because maybe the smaller companies haven't built that culture yet, or they're still in the process of building that.
Like an entrepreneurial.
yep.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's something. Thank you. That's new information to me. I guess culture was something I hadn't considered,
Yeah.
but to know that that's kind of at the forefront at a larger company's mind is interesting. Not
Yeah.
something I would have thought. And of course, we are talking in generalities
Yes,
here.
yeah,
I do
yeah,
want to make
yeah,
that clear
yeah.
to our audience, unless we give specific examples.
Right,
This is
right.
mostly in general terms.
Yes.
Not everyone is the same.
No, exactly.
Yes. So I want to ask you guys, how do you help organizations find that organization? How does that start? I imagine you come in with your list of questions, and we're peeling back that onion to get at the real
Yeah.
issue. Not maybe communication is what we think, but
Yeah.
deep down there's organizational structure.
Right, right. Well, and one of the things, especially kind of someone at kind of a PhD level will have, is a lot of tools at their disposal. So we will use a lot of different business frameworks around for example, transformational change models that we will come in that help us create a way of kind of validating a diagnostic and help you see kind of some of those incongruencies in your story, if you will. And so that kind of helps us kind of shine the spotlight on where you might see some of the needs for your organization. For example, one of my clients was trying to do a big transformation and move to more of a customer orientation. A customer focus was their strategic intention. And then when we got in and did the diagnostic, people in different stakeholder groups didn't even know who their customers were. So that's an example of something that would highlight, okay, this is a miss here. We need to look at where's the disconnect coming from, as an example.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I think the other one is kind of looking at their strategy. What is their long-term view, and how are they unpacking? And we can probably talk more about this. How are they going to unpack their current workforce and augment that at the same time to meet the challenges in, as we all know, in this dynamic environment, in business environment, and global environment as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what kind of feedback are you getting so far from your clients? I imagine it's going pretty successfully.
Yeah,
You're doing
yeah,
all right for
yeah.
yourselves. But yeah, what kind of feedback do you? Maybe some rough feedback that was hard to hear.
Yeah. Well, so think about the differences in the way consulting happened in 1996 versus 2019. So, when we first started out, it was very linear and prescriptive, and pretty much you went in and they kind of told you what they wanted done, right? Now I think that leaders are really struggling. They're really grappling with, how their organizations are being upended. Everything from a new millennial workforce coming in and wanting to have a telecommute option, or people saying performance appraisals don't work anymore, for example. So I think all these kind of issues that are emerging and kind of converging for business leaders are making it very difficult for them to find ways to navigate successfully to the end state. So I'd say, the feedback is always really grateful, to be quite honest, because it's someone coming from outside of your lens, able to shine and provide you insights that you maybe didn't see. And our goal, by the way, isn't to take the spotlight, right? We're there to make our clients look good.
Yes.
So ultimately, we help enable their success.
Right, and I can add into that from what I've seen, especially working in the technology sector, is that it's changed and going back into the 90s where they just didn't come in and say, this is what we're going to deliver, and you have to amalgamate your processes and systems into this. And then it became the more collaborative messaging saying, hey, this is what we can do, but does it align with what you need? And then having that, and again, that is in a systems and processes point of view, but it's the same thing what we do now. And now we look at the human capital, the psychology of the workforce internally to you, and how is what you decide to do going to work internally with them, right? So
nicely said. Yeah.
Yes, very nicely said. So obviously there are certain industries that you work with probably more than others, but do you have some good rules or tenets here that can apply to every business?
Yeah. I mean,
so generalizability.
Yeah. Let's break it down and be pretty general.
Yeah.
What should every business know?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked a lot about this, and I think the first thing I would say is just to really get really clear and be aware of what changes are happening in the external environment and how it's impacting your organization. Whether you're a mom or pop organization or a Fortune 500 company, we are seeing all over, we were talking earlier about Blockbuster, for example, or Borders bookstore, any of these companies, Kodak, or, any of these Blackberries, any of these companies that their trajectory was very positive, and then they had some disruption in the environment. And think about it from how difficult it is for a small company to survive, that startup, and so just being painfully aware of what's going on in your environment. And then secondly, I'd say, make sure you've got a real clear sense of your current state, how it maps to that, and what are the critical few priorities. I think this is a really key point, and something I see with all my clients is they're just inundated with stuff. I mean, think about how much we do in our personal lives, let alone professional lives. So just being really clear on what are those critical few priorities that can help you get to that desired state is really important.
Yeah, and I think I'll add into this, it's knowing absolutely where your customer, what they want now, and what you think they're going to want in the future, and kind of being proactive in that view. To add a little bit onto what Suzanne was saying, is if you look at organizational life cycle models and how they've changed from, when they really came into the forefront in the 50s and 60s and then in the 70s, where you looked at it as the organization, they had a few select, kind of target competitors that they would always watch, and they would do that. And then looking more as, okay, well, our environment might be changing. Do we have the processes and systems in 80s and 90s? Now they have to be more cognizant of the industry. So they are not only looking at their operations, but they are looking at an industry level saying, what is changing with this? Because if that goes, it doesn't matter what we do. Are we always in a revolutionary flux, or is this evolutionary? I don't know. And that's sometimes when they can't balance everything, and they need support with that. And usually they do. And that's why management levels have kind of stayed the same. They haven't really gone down, because there's always complexities being added in daily. And in business environments, I think it's more or less what, we were saying there, but it's an interesting time.
Yeah.
So,
yes, it is. And we only have a couple minutes, so this might be a long-ended question we have to answer in the second segment. But
we're kind of chatty, aren't we?
Yeah, I like it. I'm all about it. But going back to, for example, Blockbuster, was that demise inevitable because of the way that we were changing over? I know that they tried to implement those DVDs. Mailing.
I don't think it was inevitable in the sense that they were going to go no matter what. They just refused to look at what was happening in the industry.
Okay.
And didn't adapt to that. They thought they would, because they had linear growth, they were having solid revenues. They didn't have to change their model, and they didn't see they needed. Kodak was the same.
Yeah.
Or they disbelieved in the technology that was emerging in the industry. Kodak. They just did not believe that digital photography was really going to take over the way it did. And they didn't see that. Xerox.
They were blinded.
They were blinded by it. And not that they didn't know it, they just opted not to react to it as much.
And the interesting thing about Blockbuster is the legend has it that the CEO of Netflix came to Blockbuster to do a collaboration. Did you? I don't know.
I heard about that. Yeah.
And Blockbuster, basically shunned
laughed at him.
Yeah, laughed at him. Said, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And it's just what you're saying. It's being aware, being open to different ideas, being innovative, and thinking about things differently. And now we know how that story turned out for him, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
I'm excited to learn more. We're going to
Okay.
take a quick break
Sure.
here on Connect and Collaborate. Stay with us. You can find more information in the description below. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. Find this podcast more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I have in studio with me Suzanne Armatas.
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's
and
good.
Scott Freshwater, both
Thank
with Armatas Advisory Group.
Correct. Yes.
Yes. We're having a fascinating conversation here.
Yeah.
I'm thoroughly enjoying this. But in our last segment, we took off and we were talking about Blockbuster specifically.
Right.
Not being able to get on to that technology bandwagon. And
Yes.
we mentioned that he pretty much laughed at Netflix CEO and was like, you're crazy. This is never going to happen.
Yeah.
And so a lot of models have failed along the way through this.
Right.
But to pivot and looking at the opposite way of that, is there sometimes that you can jump too soon on a technology and kind of flounder
Yeah.
as well?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I think what the challenge with organization is always trying to look for that fringe. But
Okay.
sometimes you don't know which way it's going.
Right.
You can anticipate. I mean, there's just as many stories of companies dying because they refuse to accept the future. Some have overestimated the future and have died because of that. And Microsoft's a great company that's made numerous failures because they tried to anticipate a market and were wrong or incorrect in their, in the consumer's consumption of that technology or service. And I'll use it loosely only because I remember reading the story, and I think it was a vacuum cleaner company in New York City in the 50s, and it was one of the largest in the world. It was a global competitor, and obviously one of the best, biggest in the U.S. And the owner was determined to make nuclear-powered vacuum cleaners when the emergence of nuclear technologies were coming around.
Yeah.
So that company doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Weird.
Go.
Yeah.
You wonder why. Yeah.
And then there's some products that we see, like Betamax and VHS. That was a competitive game. Betamax,
Right.
predating me slightly, I can see that. But I mean,
I had one growing up. I remember. Don't you do that to
many
me.
do. But yet it was a superior technology, except VHS took off because they were better strategically placed in the market, and they took over, and that became the cultural norm. So I think that's kind of, and we see Laserdisc, a superior product, except the incremental change to that was DVDs and CDs, and they came so fast after it that technology doesn't get the respect it needed, to be the foundational technology that brought all this innovation to us, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think anything you would want to add? But
Yeah,
I mean, it's like I said, there's lots to that.
I
but,
would just say that, putting it into context of what we do in management consulting is really trying to think about, for clients that are hitting the fringe or trying to kind of pivot off their business strategies or different type of models, is really helping them think through, okay, so how does this apply and execute in your environment?
Right.
And then constantly, as you were mentioning about customers, constantly surveying what's happening and being change agile to get people to that next place.
being that customer-centric
Yeah.
organization, with an eye on the industry and then unpacking the organization to meet the future.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, and there are tools that we can use no matter what business that we're in to be able to measure this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Awesome. So what are some of the changes that you're seeing today taking place in organizations?
Yeah. I could start
Yeah,
with
you
that.
can-
Yeah, certainly.
So, I mean, when I think about, for example, I explain this to my kids, and they'll ask me something like, Mom, did you have electricity growing up? Because I think they think when I talk about, I didn't have a computer, I
Right.
didn't have emails, when
Yeah.
I got out of graduate school, I didn't have a cell phone, and so when we think about some of those initial, wireless technology, and then it was the .com era, and then it was, the idea of the ubiquitous nature of smartphones and all these kind of technology changes we're seeing, fast forward, think about our emergent technologies today. And I'm sure all of your listeners are grappling with, okay, how is AI going to disrupt our business? What does this mean by how do we leverage big data? What are some of the kind of big technology changes that are going to influence our environment? But then you're also coupled with consumer, power and expectations, social media influence, And then in our space around human capital, things like the gig economy, think about the business model the Uber has, where they don't even have employees, right? They have this
Contract,
this digital platform where they just have their their contractors external to their organization. So using a different type of worker. My PhD was in dissertation was in generations, so I'm really fascinated with baby boomers are the fastest growing segment now in our companies. So 55 plus, we're seeing a higher level of increase in terms of employment growth in those older populations, which I think is really interesting. What does that mean for an employer when you have a significant portion of your employees who maybe are 55 plus? So all these things are things that are hitting our companies, some of the changes I'm seeing, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add quickly to that. It's, when they look at their workforce, it's who is our workforce, what is our workforce, and where is our workforce? And answering those three questions, it seems it's pretty much, like that. And talking about generations, we're now into 4 generations of workforce. 4?
Yeah, yeah. And my kids who are Gen Z, we're trying to get them in the workforce.
Exactly. It's a little tougher from what I understand.
They're a little bit early, but nonetheless, start them young.
Yeah, they have the spending habits
they
of
definitely have
workers,
the
so they might as well start working.
Exactly, yeah.
Most teenagers, I think every generation goes through that easy spending habit.
Yeah.
But fascinating. I had no idea that baby boomers were the biggest growth in employment right now, 55 plus.
Yeah, and if you look at like the think tanks that do the research around labor, labor supply, and what we're seeing is a shortage, right? So, we are predicting, into 2020, 2030, that span, seeing a labor shortage. So again, when you're talking about how's that impacting our companies, talent acquisition and retention is a huge issue with our clients.
Right. And if I can add to that, we talk about generations. My parents can't believe I leave jobs. So the tenure in organizations is changing dramatically. And career shifts and time in an organization. So organizations always balance that. Well, we need to train and develop, but how long will they be here for? So what is their tenure? What does the tenure of an employee look like? Again, the who, what, where, and how.
Yeah. Well, and the opposite of that, as a millennial, I'm supposed to change careers every 2 to 5 years.
Yeah, it's almost required.
And
you're stagnant.
I stated I was a flight attendant for 8 years, and my friends galore, 8 years I practically scared them. How could you?
Right.
Yeah.
But you had a lot of variability as a flight attendant because your context, your environment was constantly changing.
Oh, yeah.
So it was almost probably to you like you were getting new jobs, maybe. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. The sentiment stayed the same. So I knew what I was doing at every job.
Yeah.
But it does have that nice flexibility there. Let's talk about the future of work.
Okay.
And how this impacts business leaders and employees.
Yeah. Okay, you want me to take
go
it?
ahead.
Okay.
I got lots to say about this. This will take us to the end, I guarantee.
Oh my gosh. Well, look, everything we just mentioned in the last question is kind of inputs to what we're seeing in future work. And the big thing that I read a lot about from research and magazines and scholars in this field is this idea of, what's upending our organizations around the technology changes? Is AI going to take away jobs, for example? And so that's really what's foremost on people's minds is around kind of how's this going to impact our companies? And so all this stuff we've been doing for 20 years, putting in development plans and working with your talented, building your successors and leadership capability and everything. Now I'd say you have to even take it to the next step, which is really getting clear on what do you have to do for your organization, unpacking what's the impact, and then what do we need to upskill that organization or those workforces? Yeah,
it really gets back to organizational foresight again. It's where is my industry going, especially manufacturing. And what does it look like, and how are we going to do it? And again, my area of study is looking at the white collar. How does their job change when automation comes in from looking at a tactile employee that's valuable to an invaluable, and how are they managing that machine and human capital at the same time? And do they need to be at those levels anymore? And how does that management change? So how does, we could probably talk a little more, and I'm sure Suzanne's got some, various views on this as well. But it's not so much that jobs get taken away, they get shifted.
Yeah,
You know,
that's right.
Yes.
we get moved out of what we change. We always have been. We just see it more at a grandiose level and it's so impactful. It's always been. It's where it's almost necessary now. Before it was unique and you were in a great environment when that happened. Now it's like, wow, we really need to be there and do this. And it, obviously it's apprehension. It's concern, and that's kind of always raising that human psychology component of it. But really, it doesn't change much, and I don't know how that looks like. And lots of people have their varying opinions. I just say what we do now might not be what we do tomorrow, but we will be doing something.
Right.
So.
And I'd like to just tag on to this, because if you look at like the statistics, like World Economic Forum just came out and said, by in the next 5 years or so, what they anticipate is like a third of a person's job task, to your point, is going to be automated. So what employers need to be thinking is, okay, so if my employee is getting a third of their job task taken away and they're left with 2/3 of a job, what does that look like? And how do I keep it from being very fragmented and disjointed? Again, you're trying to yield highest levels of organizational output. And so you have to think about the intersection of these automated parts of the role and the kind of continued traditional parts of the role. And that's a really good point, because that is the essence of what I think companies are struggling with is, what does this mean for my company, and how are employees going to survive in it? How are they going to thrive in it?
Exactly. Oh,
Especially when most companies now are kind of preaching employee centricity.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
How do they maintain that? Again, it gets back to that culture, right?
yeah.
Acculturation theories play in again an academic role. So
Absolutely. Well, and so one of our partners, the Colorado Workforce Development Council, they work with Walmart. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but clearly we're getting more automated on the checkout system.
Yes,
Every time you leave Walmart, there's more self-checkout scans.
Right.
You can order your groceries and just have them waiting for you now,
Yes.
right? So in turn, these cashiers are sort of losing their jobs. So what Walmart has done is invested in getting them back to school to learn the skills to take care of
Yes.
the automated systems.
Yes.
So they have a really great model.
shifting their what
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to look at this and take this into account.
Historically, one of the biggest change innovations was an ATM. Remember when those came out in the
Yes.
80s?
Oh.
Well, that was going to revolutionize the banking industry, and basically tellers were going to be irrelevant. Well, it turns out we can see now, 30 years later, that tellers aren't irrelevant.
No.
Their job tasks have shifted, so that automation has taken that fringe out, which is cash dispersion and cash receptacation. The tellers now do marketing, they do client fulfillment, they do engagement, they do customer relations management. They do all these tasks that have just changed a little bit.
Yep.
They're not just there to cash checks and hand out money, they're there to do more of the banking roles.
Right.
It's-
That's a great
and proportionally,
analogy.
they're the same. The numbers are, I don't know the exact numbers, so if somebody is in the banking industry, might want to dispute this, but you go into a bank and you see sufficient levels of tellers still in there.
Yeah.
And an ATM machine or 2 or 3 or a drive-through still around. So it's
Yeah.
just changed what they've done over 30 years.
Yep.
So
Exactly. And it's banking is an industry that will be with us forever. I think.
Yes.
I don't want to be quoted saying that and tomorrow everything dies. But
that was your fault.
yeah, clearly, obviously, I doomed us all. But that being said, so banking's one of those ones that inevitably had to change.
Yeah.
Walmart is one of those giants that
Yeah.
inevitably has to change.
Right.
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 So that being said, for other corporations, what can they kind of look at now?
Yeah.
What can we do now in our organizations to make sure that we're on the forefront of this and making sure that
Yeah.
our employees are still central to our business?
I'll start with kind of hear my thoughts around this. Is one of the things I'm doing with a current client is just around process capability. And if you look at where a lot of our automation is starting and where companies are kind of embracing it, is on some of those back office functions. So like accounts receivable, accounts payable, recruiting operations, customer service. So one of the things I would recommend is, take a look at your core end-to-end process and make sure that that you have process capability there, and start building in some of that process capability around, KPIs, who does what, role responsibilities. Maybe if you're deciding to augment with automation, figuring out what's that going to do for the overall end-to-end process. So that's an example, and I'm working with a client right now around some of that process capability.
Right. And one of the ones I am as well, and it's on automation, and they're not automating because I mean, obviously they see organizational efficiency as the goal. It's because they cannot get the line workers in to do some of these tasks, or the turnover is so high, like in 200% a year, and that is costly to the organization. So it's not because they want to displace workers, it's because they can't get them in. And I wanted to circle back with something you said, and I think it's important that when you look at removing processes out of something, so automating a process, when you talk about Walmart and the self-checkout, my mom would never go through a self-checkout because that is not what, so it has to be aligned with what your customer wants. You know, you see fast food, and again, they're going to automated ordering systems. It's because they can't necessarily get the people into work. But do the customers really want that? I don't want to order from a screen. I want to make sure that they know exactly what I want. So I use that in a micro level analysis, or kind of comparison, but yet it's still got to be aligned with what your customer needs on a customer service end.
But this adds to the complexity, though, because think about our retailers. I mean, my daughter is like, I mean, she knows all these retailers I've never even heard of, because she's not going into Macy's or JCPenney's or Sears. She's doing a lot of her clothes shopping online. So again, it goes back to the complexity of understanding the range of needs with your customer base. And the different generational influencers around some of these needs. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm one of those people that I refuse to order clothes online. I can't do it. I'm one of the few millennials that still sticks to Macy's.
Right?
How many times have you gone into a store and I need something now, but I'm going to still price check with Amazon and hope nobody's looking?
Yeah.
We have
information,
our cell phones,
power.
our smartphones. We have information at our fingertips that see what prices. I can say, hey, I'm going to buy this now. It empowers the consumer, which is great. So,
but the trend is more online for everything. It's still really low. Like, I think I may be misquoting, but I think it's like 13-15% of online retail right now. I may be misquoting that, but the trajectory and expectation is just expanding significantly, obviously.
Significantly.
Yeah.
I really appreciate this macro level. This is exciting stuff. I'm learning a lot today. Thank you for that. But that being said, in your day-to-day, what are some of the challenges that your clients in real time are experiencing, and how are you helping them with those challenges?
Thank you for that, because at the end we should say we are practitioners and we've built our success around getting our clients results, and so we feel our job is to help our clients solve problems. And so I'll give you some examples and then you can jump in with some. But let me just give you some examples over the, just last 5 years. Some of the big things I hear is our employees are resistant to change. That's a big thing I'll hear from a client. I can't get my employees to change fast enough, or they're stuck. And so, with that, for example, one of the things that we work on, and my work stemming back from 96 was really around change management. So everything associated with how do you make your workforce more change agile or change adaptable? And it's more than just putting in a change management toolkit. It's continually working your environment and making sure that your employees are kind of ready for that change and can address those needs. That's a big one. Another big one I'll hear is we don't have the bench strength, the leadership bench strength to take those next roles. Or our managers aren't capable of kind of leadership, kind of bigger leadership roles. And so, something we might do in that scenario is a leadership assessment. We do leadership coaching and development. It might be we have kind of a staged development program for depending on what level of leader you are. We have different levels of pathway training programs we can apply to a solution. So there's many different ways you can address that. But the goal is, really getting a really solid leadership base in place within your organization to take you to that next level. And then probably the third one I would say I hear and work with quite a bit is, again, back to this idea of our employees just don't know, kind of they're struggling in their roles. And so that could take a team, a team solution or team problem, like they just have difficulty working together. We talked about the different generational needs. We talked about kind of the diversity in the workforce, being remote. All these kind of disparate ways of working sometimes can impede a team's effectiveness. So, getting back to this idea of applying kind of some of these psychology principles, you can go in and work with group dynamics and things like that. So I'll let you address it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I look at it, I'll look at it more high level, and that is, I always say it's talent retention. We talked about this before, development and
Yes, yeah.
recruitment. You have to understand that organizations in general are extremely intelligent collectives. They kind of know what they need to do. It's just that they have so much going on. It's kind of being there to kind of say, how do we do that? They kind of arms up. We put an LMS system in, but we don't know how to use it. We don't have anybody to look after this, and we don't want to take the time to do it. Just do it. And so I think time is really the component that we have to struggle with in selling that. It's not return on investment. I mean, it is. It's part of that equation, but time is really the encompassing thing. Mm-hmm. So we have to sell that the time investment is equal to or less than the organizational benefit or business benefit or business value, per se, from these change initiatives, these development initiatives, these talent development and recruitment initiatives. It's kind of getting back to that, especially when you talk about training, because when you do that, you have to take somebody out.
Yes.
And put them in, and then train, and then have them,
and have them
regurgitate
perform.
that.
Yeah,
have them
hit the
return that.
floor and perform. Yeah.
And that's it. When they bring, so I mean, you look at it, especially working in higher education, it's so costly for these companies to take talent on, and they don't fit. So you always hear that: hire the talent, hire the person, train the talent, or train the skills. Because what they want to do is they want to make sure that they can get somebody, and then they also want to kind of mold them into their organization, right? So culturally fit them, functionally fit them, and however that might look. And I mean, she's seen that as well. But we see that from that, it's so much to get that right person in.
Well,
and if they choose wrong, and it's expensive.
And it's hard to find these, we've been talking a lot about emergent technologies. It's really hard to get some of these skills around that you need for your workforce. And so, it's costly, it's time consuming.
And that's not the white collar level. That is even at that blue collar level, those line people, they come out, safety knowledge gets lost, institutional knowledge gets lost.
Yes.
Training time, upscale, and then down, mothballing of an assembly line or whatever it might be, or production line, because they just don't have people to run that. It's super expensive. And it's to the organization, and it kills efficiency.
Yeah.
So it's not just
it's
at the leadership level.
Everyone.
Right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Last couple minutes here. So this is fantastic information.
Yeah.
I have learned a lot. Hopefully our audience is learning quite a bit.
So, yeah.
So final thoughts here. Any lasting impressions you want to leave? And certainly we want to make sure people know where to find you guys.
Yeah. Well, first let me just say this has been really fun, and I hope you and your listeners can tell we have a lot of passion about what we do. And I think part of what drives that passion is just that we have seen the ability to apply some of the things we've been talking about and yield good business outcomes for organizations. And that's so rewarding as something we do and something we take pride in the work that we do for our clients.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having us. Like I said, we can talk about this forever.
Yeah.
Trying to wrap it into an hour.
I know you're probably like,
and trying to get it out and make a cohesive wrap around to this. I hope we've hit the points, and then if we haven't, anybody can feel free to reach out. We love talking with companies. We love talking with people.
And and to that end, I would just say, one of the things that I think I enjoy doing and would just recommend, if someone has a problem, just give us a call. I mean, there's no fee for that. It's just give us a call and talk it through, and I'd be happy. Scott would be happy to give our insights and recommendations. And sometimes it may be something you can do internally. Sometimes it may be something simple, but just part of it's just having that conversation.
Right.
Awesome. Well, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
This has been a great conversation. And again, you can find all of the information in the description below. So be sure to click on that link. You can find this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. Thank you again so much,
Thanks,
Alex, Suzanne. This is wonderful.
Yeah, this is fun.
Appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.